for people that are willing to have a risk tolerance that will allow them. I mean, the world is ripe for the taking right now, not just in hotels. That's just life right now in 2026. So some people are going to be pushed and some people are going to go willingly, but I think we're going to see a lot of change.
From Hotel Tech Report, it's Hotel Tech Insider, a show about the future of hotels and the technology that powers them. Today on the show, we have Skift Editor-in-Chief and former Bloomberg Managing Editor Sarah Kopit. As independent hotel margins have shrunk, franchise chains like Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt have been exploding across the globe for the last decade. Yet, hotel owners have unprecedented access to technology, AI, and other tools, allowing them to unbundle and manage services that only major brands used to provide. Sarah joins us to unpack this massive shift and debate the true value proposition of going branded in the modern tech era. Sarah, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Sarah, so this problem of the value shift between hotel owners and chains has been bugging me for, I would say, like 5 to 7 years. The first thing that made me interested in it was really self-serving, to be totally honest. And it was, we had a software company in our ecosystem that was a client, and they worked with like 150 Hilton properties. And they basically came to us, they're like, guys, is there anything you could do at Hotel Tech Report to help us with this? We work with 150 Hilton properties, but Hilton won't even pick up the phone. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Like 150 Hilton owners like this software so much that they skirted the brand standards and they're adopting this and paying for this other software. And like Hilton won't even pick up the phone for these owners or this software company. And so I started pulling on the thread. And then right after that, I booked a trip to Miami and I looked on Marriott and I was like, holy shit, there's like 67 Marriott properties in South Beach. Like, At what point are there so many Marriott properties that the W owner in South Beach, I think, just reflagged to a Waldorf, that they're like, well, why am I paying Marriott for this when they're going to get value, whoever books anywhere? It's basically an OTA. So I'd love to go into how you got into this problem and when you first started seeing this or hearing this in your channel checks.
Yeah, so it was actually a very organic thing, I think, for me. It really only started back in January. So as you know, like I'm editor-in-chief at Skift. I don't cover hotels. It's not my beat per se. But in January 2026, when there was all of the kind of protesting, outrage, like conversation around ICE in Minneapolis specifically, the thing that struck me was just how often hotels were featured in that like protest material. There were these, like, I think they called them, noise outs. And so I pulled on that a little bit. And this is the long way of getting to your question. I went there and what I found was that hotel owners were in an absolutely no-win situation. They were getting it from every single side. There was no good solution for them. And as I talked to hotel owners while I was there, and just other reporting leads that I got to, I talked to hotel owners and I heard this over and over and over again. So it was outside of the political sphere, but, a lot of it, they talked about the financial pressures and the squeeze and how they were just feeling, it from both the bottom line and the top line. They were getting so compressed. And then there were a whole bunch of people that were like, I don't even know if we need a franchise, or I'm going independent, or I know this person who's going independent. Yeah. And it was kind of like whispers around the industry. I went to some conferences. I went to AHOA in Philly, and it was just a big topic of conversation. And so I wrote this 3-part series. The first started, like I said, in Minneapolis, just talking about political pressures around hotels. Second part was around the financial pressures, the squeeze. And then the third part is what's happening because of all of this, which is, this kind of, I don't want to say it's a groundswell yet. I looked at the numbers. We haven't seen a huge number of people actually deflagging. The numbers, according to CoStar, were about flat. But I can certainly tell you the conversation is out there. Yeah. And as this next generation, hotel ownership is often a family business. This next generation of hotel owners, like the one that I profiled in the piece Going It Alone, they're looking at their franchise agreements now. A ton of these franchise agreements that were maybe signed in the early 2000s, right as the, construction boom was taking place in the United States. And they're just like, well, I can do this kind of like you were saying, like a lot of it is AI, a lot of it is changes in banking, but like I can do this myself.
Yeah.
I can do this better without the brand. And especially for that economy and mid-tier price point, they're the ones that are really looking at this and trying to make the numbers work in the opposite direction.
Yeah. And I think especially in that AHOA contingent, we kind of talk about the finance side. So I guess there's the finance side that's been a huge anchor and boon for the chains, where it's much harder to get financing as an independent unless you're one of those, Patels with a 30-year operating history in a local area going to a local bank. What's the dynamic now with banks? And do you think that there's some room for change there, or any of the banks that you talk to that see the brand, the chain value proposition a little bit differently because of this?
Yeah, I talked to a lot of people on like, as you know, like bankers are not like a monolithic group. There's all different sorts of people who deal with money and capital raise.
Yeah.
And they really, I think a lot of them were right in the same place as the owners themselves, meaning like they are certainly hearing about it. And it's almost like they can feel it coming. And I think that they also are not immune from kind of this spread of information, like the internet, just being more aware of what's going on out there in the hotel owner community, and that you don't have to have a brand to have a successful hotel. I think that that is something that they are waking up to, and these kind of like really rigid requirements, like, in order to give you X financing, you need to, have a brand tied to it.
Yeah.
I think it is loosening. I think it is changing. And that's what a lot of the pros that I talked to told me.
Did loyalty play into this? Like, I just think about the devaluation of loyalty programs, and I'm like, I don't know, like, I got some points at Marriott, but am I really getting points? And I've got this Amex Plat, which gives me status. Am I really getting anything for that? Do you feel like that was playing into the owner mindset at all?
I actually think the opposite. What I heard was that the loyalty issue was one that the independent guys can't really solve themselves. Like that was a bit of a difficulty, so to speak. I'm a Marriott Bonvoy member. Like, I don't know, like if I'm driving down I-80 and I need to, stay over for the night, I'm probably going to whip out my phone and like see who's closest and who, where I can get a hotel room for my points. And they acknowledged that. They acknowledged that that was something that was a pain point for them, that it was difficult for them to replicate that. But I know that there are some companies out there who are trying to do that, like group the independents together and all those kind of things. But I would say that that was more on it's not so easy to go independent. The loyalty side of it was the harder part for them.
And do the owners generally feel like that loyalty is accruing to them? I guess I know you talked a little bit about in your article about how I think one of the people that you interviewed, I think it was a lawyer who reviewed franchise agreements at end of life, saying if you're over 40% in bookings from the chains, then it's worth it. And if not, then you should really reconsider what you're doing. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think that what he was really saying was that it really depends upon who you are if going independent really makes sense for you. Like if you're getting X number of your business from the loyalty apparatus, if they're really sending you a lot of stuff, maybe it works for you. So if that is you, if you are that owner who really has a really good loyalty program and really gets customers from that demographic of consumer, then you should probably stay. But if not, then you should take a hard look at it. And he was also saying that, he's been his name is Bob Braun. He's a franchise attorney in California. And he said that in the 30 years plus that he's been doing this, now the idea of going independent is something that he asks and he talks to all of his clients about, no matter who they are. And that has not always been the case. That is not something it's a relatively, newish thing that it would be even an option. And so he said that it's just something now that really, it's a real option for people. And it just hasn't been the case over the last 20 or 30 years.
As you talk to the brands and you say, hey, the value proposition has kind of been unbundled, the banks are more open to having better terms for independence, the OTAs are driving a significant amount of demand. And now the hotels have enough technology that they can kind of put together the same stack or better than what you guys are providing, because you have to roll something out ecosystem wide. They can switch out and get best of breed really quickly. And then layer on top of that, in the US, you have these management companies that basically do all of the work. So where does the brand play in the future? And how do the brands respond to you when you ask them that question?
So it's interesting because the brands are making more money than they ever have ever. And that is part of, I think, the financial squeeze that everybody has talked about or the owners have talked about. I think if the brands, this is just my take on this is my gut feeling. If the brands weren't making so much money, the owners wouldn't be so upset. Granted, they would still be feeling the pinch, but if it was going around equally, I think that it wouldn't be as hard to stomach. That is not the case. I mean, it's earnings season right now. I completely expect they will all report record earnings, as they've said that they probably will. So I think that the brands are in a very interesting situation because the business model they've got going on right now at this exact moment is working really, really, really well for them. That is what a corporation, especially a public company, is, like Marriott's and the Hiltons of the world. That is what they have to do. They have a fiduciary duty to their shareholders. Their entire purpose of being in existence is to make money, and that's what they're doing. But they also know, what the brands have also told me, is they understand that their future is incredibly linked to the success of their owners. And there will become a point where if enough of those owners fail or are in trouble, then it is going to start affecting the bottom line. And so they know this. They talk about this. They understand, like the CEOs on earnings calls and such, they've been pretty open about the fact that they are doing really well. And they often phrase it around the pandemic, like the recovery hasn't been the same for everybody. That's generally how you hear them say it. But, at the same time, they, like I said, they want to make money. They want to keep being profitable. So, some of them are doing things like cutting back on certain fees. If you reach like a score from your customers, like small things like that. I've seen some of the bigger companies do. I know that, especially coming out of the pandemic, a lot of the PIPs were, put on hold, but we're 6 years out now. So those are starting to come due, which is another hardship. So I think that the brands are saying, we know there's a problem. Here are some of our very small solutions, but it kind of, when you talk to an owner, if I put my owner hat on, they're going to say, well, that is a drop in the ocean. It's not enough. It's too little. So, but the brands know that this is an issue for them. They know that it's something that's eventually going to come to bite them if they don't fix it. And I think that they're trying to make incremental changes to kind of see where that level is.
So one thing that's always been my perception, I had Sloan Dean on the podcast, who was the CEO of Remington, and he seemed to think that it was a little different. But I always thought the OTAs kind of incentivize this the same way the banks do, and that if you're a Marriott property, you pay some marginally lower contribution on your OTA bookings, and Marriott's kind of negotiated this. So I'm like, Booking is kind of helping grow Marriott, which is then hurting Booking. I'm like, why don't you just give the preferential rates to the independents? And that way you get more independence and you kind of break up that, I don't want to say monopoly tendency. You're trying to shift the competitive pressure out of that space and then give yourself the power. But I'm surprised that the OTAs they're so favorable, but I guess they just have to have that inventory on the platform.
Yeah, I was going to say the OTAs need to make money too. So there's that. But one of the owners that I talked to, he had an interesting point. Like you talk about the fees to OTAs, and owners don't really like that either. But one of the owners that's in my piece, he was like, I never used to really book with Airbnb, but now I do. Now that I'm independent, my little hotel, I have an Airbnb plugin and I'm getting this entirely new type of consumer that I just didn't have access to before and, would never have found me before. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He brought that up. That was something that he wanted to tell me about.
That owner that you featured in your piece, where is he in the decision process? And what were his biggest apprehensions about going it solo? Because it sounded like the financing was kind of locked in. What are the biggest barriers to going it on his own?
Yeah. So his name was Pritesh Patel. And, he's a smart dude. He was a consultant at Price Waterhouse. And, he kind of didn't think about being a hotelier. His parents were. He'd grown up with that. And it really, truly was like he just read the agreement and was like, yeah, I can do better. And he talked to me through like what the steps were. They did include financing, going to his bank. But I think for him, his family's hotel was a Super 8. He was just like, nobody is coming to stay at a Super 8. And so there really wasn't much friction for him specifically. He had a pretty good idea of what exactly he could do. And he went out and did it. He had also worked at Cloudbeds, so he had experience with some of the tools that, PMS that could make this easier for him, that allowed his operating system to go. So he also is very online. Like there's a link in the piece to his Instagram account. So he's very up on the content space and how that for advertising and loyalty can help. So that was him. And then there was another guy that I talked to who was kind of on a different end of the spectrum. He really struggled with his hotel. He was in Arkansas. He was with Choice. And he really was at the point where he was like, it wasn't like with Pritesh, it was more, I have a better idea of how to grow this business. With Gary, that was the other owner, he was like, it just economically does not make sense for me anymore. Like I have to go it alone or else I can't survive. And so they were kind of two sides of the same coin, like same decision, different circumstances. And I think but very similar outcomes, meaning, they both had to find a PMS system. They both had to kind of rename. They both dealt with the tech struggles of, Gary was telling me how he had such a hard time with Google because he lost all of the, 400 plus reviews that he had spent 18 years building up. He thought of those as his. These are my reviews for my hotel that I had run for 18 years. But then when he left the franchise system, those all went to Choice, not him. And so he had to start over fresh. So there were certain pain points and frictions for both of them, but they both made the same decision, which was to leave.
There is like an ethical consideration that plays in there, but that's super interesting. Do you feel like these guys had a clear roadmap where it was like, okay, get my lawyer, cancel this agreement, sign up with my new PMS, migrate my data over? And do you feel like from there, they felt confident into the steps that needed to be done to get back to that steady state and start improving and growing as Pritesh wanted to do?
I do. And I feel like there's enough people out there now who are doing this, so they have a little bit of, support. I mean, if these, you take Pritesh, for example, he's the one actually who's kind of leading the way and teaching other people how to do this. But I think it's very similar to just so many things out there. We're kind of a DIY world right now. It used to be you had to pay a lot of money to go learn and how to do all sorts of things in this world. And now I could probably like type on Claude and like figure out how to be an expert in X, Y, and Z that 10 years ago would have taken me God knows how long to do. So I think for people who are ambitious, for people who aren't afraid of change, for people that are willing to have a risk tolerance that will allow them. I mean, the world is ripe for the taking right now, not just in hotels. That's just life right now in 2026. So some people are going to be pushed and some people are going to go willingly, but I think we're going to see a lot of change.
Obviously, you talked about the franchise attorney. Did you see any ecosystem of consultants that like help people deflag hotels or just at least provide them that peace of mind that's like, I know this is a little bit of a scary thing, but I'm going to get you the bank. I'm going to get you the software. I'm going to get you all the things that you need to get in touch with Google, whatever.
I did not. What a good business pitch right there.
What's the size of the prize? As someone like Pritesh was modeling it out, how much more profit did he think that he could yield or cash flow relative to sticking with Super 8 in that case?
I mean, look, he's doing gangbusters. He opened his books to me a little bit, and he just bought another hotel, another former franchise that he's taking independent. So, I mean, the sky's the limit. Like, I did ask him. I'm like, well, you're going to become a franchisor? Absolutely not.
And the fees that he modeled were mostly just that percentage of revenue that he's paying into management fees. Were there any other areas where he was like, hey, like, if I get rid of their PMS, I can do this meta search thing through Cloudbeds that I can't do on my own now?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually kind of funny when he was talking to me about that. He was actually kind of saying that the amount in like the actual franchise fee that he's like, I don't know, it's just a few percent. For him, I really do think it was more of a control of the brand and the identity than it was pure play, like percentage off the top line revenue. He wanted to make a better product. That's what he wanted to do. And so that's where the money is really coming for him is really on that. It's more, he's making money as opposed to saving money.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, this has been really, really cool to not just talk to you here, but read the stories that you're putting out there. It's such an important message, I think, for the industry to be thoughtful about where things are going and what decisions we're making and what are these barriers, bottlenecks, and red flags of like shaking it loose with and muckraking with the banks of like, why are you only giving financing to this business when this one could actually be more profitable? And then also providing paths, like you're saying, that you can go to a local bank, you can establish an operating history, you can do all these things that even if you're not going to switch now, like set yourself up to switch so you're in a stronger position your next negotiation. And maybe you can negotiate your fees down because you have this other option. And so it just makes life so much better for these owners and they can create better businesses. And there could be a new fourth generation of Patels that own all the hotels in the US.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Sarah. And let's do this again.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to Hotel Tech Insider, produced by HotelTechReport.com. Our goal with this podcast is to show you how the best in the business are leveraging technology to grow their properties and outperform the comp set by using innovative digital tools and strategies. I encourage all of our listeners to go try at least one of these strategies or tools that you learned from today's episode. Successful digital transformation is all about consistent small experiments over a long period of time. So don't wait until tomorrow to try something new. Do you know a hotelier who would be great to feature on this show? Or do you think that your story would bring a lot of value to our audience? Reach out to me directly on LinkedIn by searching for Jordan Hollander. For more episodes like this, follow Hotel Tech Insider on all major streaming platforms like Spotify and Apple Music.